Daniel Brooks stared at the massive screen floating before him. The call had come unexpectedly, an official message stamped with the seal of the Vera Empire. He had seen many unusual requests in his career as a security consultant for interstellar missions, but this was unlike anything he had encountered before. The message was brief, almost curt. Report immediately to the Vera Imperial Palace. Your services are required for urgent matters concerning the royal family. Authorization clearance granted. Daniel rubbed his eyes. The Vera Empire was distant, mysterious, and notoriously selective. Their rulers were not known for trusting outsiders, much less humans. Yet here was a direct order, bypassing all usual channels, and signed with the unmistakable authority of the Queen herself. Daniel had no choice but to accept. Ignoring the summons could be interpreted as disrespectful or even hostile. Within hours, he boarded the cruiser assigned to his transport. The vessel was sleek, polished, and silent. Unlike human ships, which often relied on crew and visible controls, this ship operated with an almost organic fluidity, guided by systems he did not fully understand. He watched as the stars shifted outside the reinforced viewing panels, feeling both awe and apprehension. Humanity had been in contact with the Vera for decades, but trust had never been a word associated with the Empire. The journey was long but uneventful. Daniel spent his time reviewing what little intelligence he could find on the royal family. Queen Lysera was renowned across the galaxy for her intellect and strategic prowess. Her daughter, Princess Arai, was said to be intelligent, poised, and a skilled diplomat, though little more than that was known. Most humans had never seen her face, only reports and hollow images. Daniel felt the weight of expectation pressing on him. Whatever awaited him in the palace would not be routine security detail. Upon arriving at the palace, Daniel was escorted through corridors of polished metal and alien design, corridors that seemed to twist in ways that human eyes struggled to track. Servants, guards, and aides moved around silently, their expressions carefully neutral. He was brought to a chamber where he finally met the Queen. Lysera's presence was commanding, yet there was a flicker of worry in her eyes, something that human beings might recognize as fear, though masked by her regal composure. "Daniel Brooks," she said, her voice calm and precise. "I have watched humanity closely. Your people are unpredictable in ways that make you difficult to anticipate, yet your determination and loyalty are qualities we value. My daughter is in danger, and our usual protectors have failed to uncover the source. You will serve as her guardian." Daniel was stunned. He had expected some form of brief assignment, perhaps an advisory role or a routine security task. But to be personally entrusted with protecting the princess of the Vera Empire was extraordinary. "Your Majesty," he said, choosing his words carefully, "I will do everything I can to protect her." Lysera nodded, though her expression remained unreadable. "This will not be easy. There are forces at work within the Empire that you cannot yet comprehend. Your perspective as a human is precisely why I am entrusting this task to you. You will not be constrained by the expectations of our society." It was then that Daniel met Princess Arai. She was nothing like the cold, distant images he had seen in reports. She had sharp eyes, curious and unafraid, and her expression carried a mix of intelligence, defiance, and weariness. She immediately studied him, her gaze piercing as if testing his resolve. "Why am I being assigned a human as my protector?" she asked, her tone polite but tinged with skepticism. "Humans have a reputation for stubbornness." Daniel smiled faintly. "Perhaps that stubbornness will work in your favor. I see challenges differently, and I am not bound by the rules of your empire." Arai studied him for a long moment before nodding slightly. "Very well, but understand this. My life is not just important to my mother, it is crucial to the future of the empire. Fail me and you fail more than just one person." Daniel felt the weight of the task settle over him like a tangible force. He could not fail. He would not. The days that followed were a crash course in alien customs, security protocols, and palace intrigue. Daniel had expected rigid routines and predictability, but he quickly realized that the danger was subtle, woven into every corridor, every official, every system in the palace. Surveillance drones malfunctioned at suspicious times, guards avoided certain hallways, and whispers among aides hinted at hidden factions working in secrecy. It became clear that the threats were not external. These were not rebels or mercenaries from distant systems. They were insiders. Someone close to the throne desired harm to Princess Arai, someone with knowledge of the palace and access to its most secure areas. One evening, during a festival meant to celebrate interstellar alliances, the danger made itself evident. Hidden drones fired silent energy pulses at the princess while she was mingling among delegates. Daniel reacted instinctively, throwing himself between her and the attack, guiding her through hidden passages designed for emergencies but rarely used. The chaos was brief, yet the message was unmistakable. The enemy knew the palace's secrets intimately. After the failed attack, Lysera summoned Daniel to her private chamber. Her expression was unreadable, but her tone carried urgency. "They know our movements. They know our strategies. You must relocate the princess off-world until we can identify the traitors." "It is no longer safe here." Arai resisted initially. She had never left the capital, never seen life beyond the palace walls. Yet Daniel's calm insistence, combined with the undeniable danger, persuaded her. She agreed to trust him, and together they boarded a private transport, leaving the comfort and safety of her home behind. The journey took them to remote colonies where humans and aliens coexisted in uneasy but functional communities. Arai observed life she had never encountered, markets bustling with species from dozens of systems, children playing without fear of political machinations, workers living lives that were challenging but honest. She began to understand that the empire she had known was a complex web of power, control, and perception. Daniel, for his part, watched over her carefully while allowing her to learn from these experiences. He encouraged her to observe quietly, to understand the people without revealing her identity. He shared stories of humanity's resilience, the ways humans endured hardships and built alliances through trust and courage rather than fear. Arai began to see possibilities for herself that she had never imagined, possibilities for leadership that relied on wisdom and empathy rather than authority and intimidation. But danger was never far behind. Messages intercepted from trade networks suggested a growing conspiracy among imperial officials. The attackers were not merely opportunists. They were loyalists who believed the Queen's openness to humans threatened their species' dominance. Every step they took, every ally they approached, had to be measured and precise. One night on a mining colony far from the capital, they were tracked. Mercenaries, hired and informed by the conspirators, attacked without warning. Daniel led Arai through tunnels and caverns, guiding her as they coordinated defenses with the local workers. The princess, initially hesitant and unsure, began to act decisively. She directed workers to secure vulnerable positions, improvised defensive measures, and even took a calculated risk to draw enemy fire away from Daniel. After the skirmish, as they hid among the rocky outcrops, Arai spoke quietly. "I have always felt like a symbol, a figurehead for the Empire. I never thought I could really act in a way that matters. Today, I felt alive, not just important." Daniel smiled, though the tension in his body remained. "Leaders are respected when they stand beside their people, not above them. You did well. You inspired loyalty, and that is more powerful than fear." The next day, a hidden transmission from Queen Lysera arrived, detailing the acceleration of the conspiracy. The traitors were planning a decisive strike during an upcoming council gathering, intending to eliminate both the Queen and the princess, using humans as convenient scapegoats. Lysera urged them to return immediately, but Daniel sensed the danger in rushing back without preparation. They decided instead to gather evidence and allies, careful to stay one step ahead of the conspirators. As the first part of their journey drew to a close, Daniel and Arai looked out at the stars from the colony's observation deck. The enormity of the task ahead weighed on them. They were far from home, hunted by unseen enemies, and the fate of an empire rested on their courage and judgment. Arai's hands, usually so delicate and composed, gripped the railing with resolve. "I don't know what awaits us," she said softly, "but I trust you, Daniel." "I have no choice but to trust you." Daniel nodded, understanding the gravity of her words. Trust was a rare commodity, and in this galaxy of power, deception, and ambition, it was also a weapon. He had vowed to protect her, and now, under alien suns and distant stars, he would see that vow through, no matter the cost. The Vera Empire had many secrets, and the palace walls had hidden countless dangers. But Daniel understood one truth clearly. Survival, loyalty, and courage could bridge even the widest chasms between human and alien, between protector and princess. And as they prepared for the challenges to come, both realized that the next steps would not only test their skills but also their hearts, their judgments, and the very limits of trust. The journey had begun, and already the galaxy had begun to watch. The next weeks were a test of patience, endurance, and ingenuity for Daniel and Princess Arai. Far from the glittering towers and endless corridors of the Vera Imperial Palace, they moved through distant colonies and neutral planets, places that rarely saw royalty and even less often human guardians. For Daniel, the challenge was as much about teaching the princess how to survive outside the safety of her walls, as it was about uncovering the conspirators who threatened her life. For Arai, it was a revelation. Suddenly the world was neither orderly nor predictable, and she had to act and think for herself, rather than relying on the orders of advisors or palace protocol. Their first stop was a colony on the edge of the Andron Belt, a cluster of mining worlds rich in minerals but dangerous in every other way. The human and alien miners lived in a fragile truce, constantly negotiating access to resources, dealing with environmental hazards, and protecting themselves from raiders. Daniel explained to Arai that survival often meant adapting to circumstances faster than the situation could change. "You can have armies, ships, or drones," he said one evening, "but if you can't think, react, and use what's around you, none of that will help." Arai observed quietly as miners worked, and slowly began to understand their world. She noticed how alliances were forged not by law or rank, but by trust, action, and loyalty. One night, she followed a group of miners repairing a damaged transport vessel and watched as they coordinated without speaking much, relying on gestures, glances, and shared understanding. The simplicity and efficiency amazed her. Back at the palace, everything was governed by rigid rules, hidden codes, and a hierarchy that often slowed action. Here, action spoke louder than authority. Daniel encouraged her to try simple tasks herself. She struggled at first, holding a welding tool, climbing ladders, moving heavy crates. But with each attempt, she learned not only the physical skills but the thought process behind human ingenuity. "It's not about strength," Daniel told her. "It's about solving problems, sometimes with nothing but what's around you. Humans do it every day." Arai listened intently, beginning to internalize the lesson. She realized that leadership was not about giving orders but understanding challenges, anticipating consequences, and acting decisively. Amid these lessons, danger never rested. Daniel intercepted encrypted transmissions, suggesting that the conspirators were monitoring their movements. High-ranking officers in the Empire had been in contact with mercenaries and even alien trade organizations, ensuring that no corner of the colony was truly safe. The realization that the enemy had reached beyond the palace was unsettling, but Daniel treated it as a puzzle. Each message, each intercepted signal, was a piece of information he could use to anticipate threats. It was on the third week, in the shadow of the colony's largest ore refinery, that the first real confrontation occurred. Mercenaries, moving silently through the darkness, attempted to capture the princess. Daniel anticipated the attack, having noted patterns in the local traffic and the timing of patrols. He guided Arai through maintenance tunnels, using narrow passages to avoid open spaces. When they emerged, they were surrounded by mercenaries, weapons raised, but Daniel had prepared for this. Improvised barricades, careful use of lighting, and the element of surprise allowed them to neutralize several attackers before the rest realized what had happened. Arai's role surprised her, and Daniel noticed it. She instinctively coordinated the miners, using their knowledge of the tunnels and equipment to create diversions and traps. It was the first time she had acted in combat, and her quick thinking saved them both. Later, as they regrouped, she admitted her fear but also her exhilaration. "I never thought I could make a difference like this," she said quietly. Daniel nodded. "This is the real world. Decisions here have consequences that no royal decree can predict." The incident reinforced a truth both had come to understand. Survival and leadership depended not only on skill but on adaptability. Daniel began to teach Arai the basics of strategy, using simulations with limited resources to train her decision-making. He created scenarios where they had to plan escapes, gather allies, or identify traitors based on subtle clues. Each exercise honed her instincts, and Arai started to see herself not just as a princess, but as a protector, a thinker, and a strategist. During quiet nights, they shared stories. Daniel spoke of Earth, of cities and forests, of people who had faced crises and found solutions through creativity and courage. Arai shared memories of the palace, its beauty, its strict rules, the loneliness of being constantly observed. Through these conversations, Daniel gained insight into the princess's personality. She was curious, compassionate, but also had a streak of impatience for bureaucracy and tradition. Understanding her strengths and weaknesses became part of his strategy for keeping her alive. One day, a breakthrough arrived. A series of transmissions, carefully decoded, revealed that the conspirators intended to manipulate a council meeting to stage an assassination. Their plan was precise. They would eliminate both Lysera and Arai simultaneously, framing human interference as the cause and use it to justify a purge against humans within the Empire. The scope of the conspiracy stunned Daniel. Not only were the enemies powerful, but they were deeply embedded in the structures of the Empire. Every move needed to be carefully calculated. Arai's reaction was a mixture of fear and resolve. She had always known that her position carried risk, but understanding the scale of betrayal within her own people changed her perception. She realized that authority alone could not protect her. Only vigilance, intelligence, and courage could. Daniel encouraged her to focus not on the fear but on preparation. "We cannot stop what has begun," he said, "but we can decide how we respond." As they traveled between colonies, seeking allies and gathering information, Arai learned to blend diplomacy with strategy. She spoke with local leaders, sometimes in disguise, observing how they responded to threats, how they judged loyalty, and how they valued honesty over ceremony. Slowly, she began to understand the subtle power of influence, the way a leader could guide without commanding, inspire without demanding. The final weeks before their return to the capital were tense. Every intercepted message, every suspicious movement, reminded them that time was against them. Daniel and Arai devised a plan. They would return to the imperial capital under the cover of anonymity, armed with evidence of the conspiracy, allies who had pledged loyalty, and a strategy that relied on both human intuition and alien intelligence. They knew the conspirators would expect a direct approach, so subtlety became their most powerful tool. On the eve of their return, Arai stood at the edge of a cliff overlooking the twin suns of a remote world. The landscape stretched endlessly, a reminder of how vast and unpredictable the galaxy was. She reflected on the journey, realizing how much she had grown in a matter of weeks. She could make decisions, act decisively, and inspire loyalty. For the first time, she felt a sense of ownership over her life, over her role in the Empire. Daniel approached quietly. "You've changed," he said simply. Arai turned to him, a faint smile on her lips. "I had to," she replied. "I cannot rely on anyone else. If we fail, the Empire falls, and so does everyone who trusts us. I have to be ready." Daniel nodded, silently acknowledging the truth in her words. Together, they began final preparations for their return. They coordinated with allies in the capital, arranged safe routes, and rehearsed contingencies for every possible outcome. The plan was meticulous, relying on both strategy and intuition, human and alien collaboration. As they boarded the transport that would take them back to the capital, Daniel felt a mixture of anticipation and caution. The conspiracy they faced was formidable, and the palace held dangers they could not yet fully see. Yet he also felt confidence. Arai was no longer the sheltered princess he had met weeks ago. She was an active participant, capable of thinking, adapting, and acting under pressure. Together, they were more than a princess and a protector. They were a team prepared to face the galaxy's threats with courage and intelligence. The stars streaked past as the transport jumped into hyperspace. Both Daniel and Arai knew the next phase of their journey would define not only their lives, but the future of the Vera Empire. The conspirators would not wait. Every moment brought them closer to confrontation. But for the first time, they faced it not with fear alone, but with preparation, skill, and the unspoken understanding that trust, loyalty, and courage could change outcomes that otherwise seemed inevitable. The transport shivered as it exited hyperspace, revealing the familiar yet ominous skyline of the Vera imperial capital. Even from a distance, Daniel could see the massive towers, the glimmering spires, and the constant hum of energy that powered the city. Despite their preparations, the enormity of what awaited them pressed heavily on both him and Princess Arai. The conspirators were already in motion, embedded within the very council that governed the Empire, and every step they took could be anticipated. Arai gazed at the city from the transport's viewing panel. "It feels different now," she murmured. "Before I saw it as home, as safety. Now I see danger in every shadow," Daniel nodded. "That's why preparation is key. We know their plan and we have evidence. We can act with purpose, not panic." Their first move upon landing was subtle. Instead of approaching the palace through standard gates, Daniel guided them through maintenance tunnels and lesser-known service routes that bypassed main security checkpoints. Only a few trusted allies, previously recruited during their travels, knew of their return. Each corridor echoed with history, with whispers of past rulers and hidden intrigues, but Daniel remained focused on the task ahead: protect the princess and expose the conspirators. When they reached the private chambers arranged for them, Arai paused. She ran her hands along the smooth metallic walls, thinking of how far she had come since leaving the palace weeks ago. She had learned to act decisively, to trust her instincts, and to coordinate with humans and aliens alike. She understood now that leadership was not about fear, protocol, or symbols. It was about courage, foresight, and the ability to inspire loyalty through action. Daniel reviewed the final details of their plan. "The council session is the perfect opportunity. The conspirators will expect us to arrive openly under scrutiny. We will not. We move discreetly, present evidence, and reveal their plan at the moment that causes maximum disruption without unnecessary risk to others." Arai listened carefully, absorbing every instruction. Her hands, once delicate and unpracticed, now gripped the controls confidently. She felt the responsibility of her position more keenly than ever. If they failed, it would not only cost her life but could trigger chaos across the Empire. She could feel the weight of her choices pressing down on her, yet it fueled her resolve rather than weakening it. The council chamber was a marvel of design. Towers of translucent metal rose high above the participants, casting soft reflections across the polished floor. Delegates from countless species took their seats, unaware that the most dangerous individuals were already among them. Daniel and Arai observed quietly from hidden vantage points, waiting for the right moment to act. The conspirators moved with practiced ease. Admiral Relic, the mastermind behind the assassination plot, occupied a central position, speaking quietly with his allies. Daniel noted the subtle signs: guarded glances, restrained gestures, and the barely perceptible tension in their posture. Every detail confirmed what he already suspected. They had planned this meticulously, but they had underestimated the human element and, more importantly, Princess Arai's newfound courage. As the session began, Arai stepped forward. Daniel gave her a subtle nod. She moved with deliberate calm, drawing attention without drawing alarm. She began to address the council, her voice clear, confident, and firm. "I am aware of a conspiracy within these walls," she announced, pausing as murmurs spread through the delegates. "A plot exists to eliminate both my mother and myself, to manipulate the Empire into war against humans. I have evidence, and I will reveal it now." Gasps echoed throughout the chamber. The conspirators' faces tightened with anger and panic. Admiral Relic's eyes narrowed, realizing that the element of surprise had been lost. Daniel activated discreet security measures, guiding loyal guards and allies to strategic positions while ensuring that no innocent delegates were harmed. Arai continued, presenting documents, intercepted communications, and testimonies collected during their travels. She spoke without hesitation, articulating each detail so clearly that even those unfamiliar with the full context could understand the threat. The conspirators attempted to intervene, but Daniel anticipated their moves. Coordinating with loyalists, he neutralized disruptions, shielding Arai while maintaining control of the situation. Then came the critical moment. Admiral Relic attempted a direct assault, moving toward Arai with a concealed energy weapon. Daniel intercepted him with swift precision, using his human agility and combat training. Arai, instead of retreating, took decisive action. She signaled loyal delegates to act, using her presence and authority to disrupt the conspirators' formation. Her confidence was no longer theoretical. It was tangible, commanding the attention and obedience of those around her. The confrontation escalated into a tense struggle. Daniel moved between attackers, deflecting weapons and protecting Arai while minimizing casualties. He relied on human ingenuity, improvising tactics with available tools, leveraging the environment and anticipating enemy moves. Arai, observing the chaos, took calculated risks, guiding loyalists, directing defensive measures, and exposing vulnerabilities in the conspirators' plan. The battle reached its climax when Admiral Relic attempted to manipulate the Council's energy systems to cause destruction. Daniel and Arai moved in perfect coordination. Using knowledge of the palace layout and Relic's own planning, they rerouted systems, contained potential damage, and cornered the Admiral. Surrounded and outmaneuvered, Relic finally surrendered, his plot completely exposed to the Council. The aftermath was immediate. Delegates and officials who had been unsure, skeptical, or fearful now witnessed the power of decisive action, loyalty, and courage. The conspiracy collapsed under scrutiny, its members arrested or neutralized. Queen Lysera, observing from a secure chamber, finally allowed herself a moment of relief. She knew that the choice to trust a human had been risky, but it had succeeded beyond expectation. Humanity's resilience, adaptability, and determination had tipped the scales in a way that no alien protocol or tradition could have. Daniel and Arai emerged from the council chamber, their presence now acknowledged and respected by all. Arai turned to Daniel, a mixture of gratitude and awe in her eyes. "You were right," she said softly. "Courage and trust, these matter more than protocol, more than strategy alone. We did this together." Daniel smiled, though the tension in his body remained. "It's not about me. It's about what we can accomplish when we work together, when we use our minds, our instincts, and our courage. You led as much as I did." Lysera approached them afterward. Her regal presence was softened by relief and admiration. "You have not only protected my daughter, but demonstrated a lesson that will reshape our empire. Trust, courage, and loyalty are more powerful than fear or control. You have my gratitude, Daniel Brooks, and my respect." Arai, standing beside her mother, now fully recognized her own growth. She had faced danger, made decisions under pressure, inspired others, and acted decisively. She was no longer the sheltered princess she had been weeks ago. She had become a leader in her own right, capable of guiding, protecting, and inspiring. In the days that followed, the empire began to stabilize. The exposed conspirators were tried, and measures were taken to ensure that similar threats could not arise unnoticed. Humans within the empire were acknowledged not merely as outsiders, but as allies whose unique perspective and resilience could be invaluable. The alliance between humans and the Vera strengthened, based on mutual respect rather than fear. Daniel, expecting to return quietly to his own world, was surprised when Arai approached him with a new request. "I want you to remain," she said, "not as a protector, but as an advisor, a guide, and a friend. You have shown me what it means to act decisively, to think creatively, and to trust fully. The Empire needs that perspective." He hesitated for a moment, considering the implications. Staying meant accepting a permanent role in an alien world far from Earth. But he understood the opportunity, not just for personal involvement, but for humanity itself to influence the future of the galaxy. "I will stay," he said finally. "If my presence can help, I will not refuse." The story of that crisis spread across the Empire. Humans were no longer seen merely as curious outsiders, but as beings capable of bravery, loyalty, and ingenuity that could rival even the most disciplined alien forces. Arai's leadership, shaped by experience, collaboration, and courage, became a model for future rulers. She had learned that power alone was not enough. Influence required understanding, decisiveness, and the ability to inspire trust. As Daniel looked out over the city once more, he realized that the journey had changed him as much as it had changed Arai. Humanity's strength, he thought, was not just in technology, numbers, or weapons. It was in the capacity to act decisively, to adapt, and to inspire others to follow. It was a lesson the galaxy would remember, carried by the courage of one human and the growth of a princess who had learned to lead not with fear, but with wisdom, trust, and heart. And so, in a distant corner of the galaxy, an empire was reshaped, a princess was transformed, and a human guardian had proven that the smallest choices, the bravest actions, and the truest loyalty could change the fate of worlds. The alliance between species grew stronger, and the echoes of that crisis would be remembered as the moment when courage, intelligence, and humanity triumphed over conspiracy, fear, and power alone. Daniel and Arai stood together at the palace balcony, looking toward the stars. The danger had passed, but the lessons remained. They had faced betrayal, danger, and near destruction, yet had emerged stronger, wiser, and more united. The galaxy was vast, and threats would always arise, but the bond forged through trials, trust, and courage was a force no one could ignore. The future of the Vera Empire and humanity's role within it was no longer uncertain. Together, they had shaped it. Together, they had ensured that courage, loyalty, and intelligence would be remembered as the guiding stars of the new era. And Daniel, once just a human sent to protect a princess, realized that in doing so, he had become a part of history, a witness to the moment when humanity proved that even in the darkest corners of the galaxy, it could rise, act, and change destiny.